All right, here we go. OverDrive off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app. Your home smart speaker up on TSN 4 all afternoon. Bryan Hayes, Frankie Corrado in studio. Noodles out in Halifax, I believe.
Yeah.
Sidney Crosby making his return home to the East Coast.
Did you see that craft dinner with noodles on the back of it with the old packaging?
I had no idea. I had no idea that was a real thing.
No, I don't think I've ever heard that story, but that brought back some memories just seeing that packaging. I used to crush craft dinner. Mm-hmm. Like for an Italian kid to eat that much craft dinner is probably sacrilege, but that packaging is nostalgic for me.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's tough to mess up, but if you mess it up, it's carnage, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't go about the steps properly. And I remember at one point someone made it for me and it was like a late edition of the cheese, which is supposed to be mixed, obviously, and it was kind of like doused on top, and yet it was one of those scenarios where I'm like, I guess I gotta eat it, like this is what we're doing here. I'm gonna have to be,
dude. Let me ask you this:
you're gonna have some class here and take care of this. So,
have you ever seen the appearance of a big spoonful of cheese whiz go into the craft dinner? You ever seen that maneuver done?
No, I have not had it in years. My kids are eating it now.
Yeah.
Like my kids are into it, and I don't think we add any crazy ingredients that are not supposed to be a part of that. But
massive spoon of cheese whiz right in there.
No.
Let us know if you've done cheese whiz in the craft dinner.
Well, puts hot dogs in there, right? Like that is a delicacy. That is a delicacy, a little KD with hot dogs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different things I guess you can do. People put beans in there, like a real delicacy, man. Yeah. No, it's not for me. I can't do it anymore. I used to at the same time when I was in school, like it's very economically sound.
Yes.
Right? So you can get after that every once in a while, especially after the bar or something. If you don't have any money left for like a slice of pizza or something.
Dude, were you the guy that comes home from the bar and fires up KD? There's that's a guy.
If you
what
have
I mean?
to. Listen, I'm not saying I was doing that every single night, but if you had to, yes you had to.
No,
I wasn't going to sleep. I can guarantee you that.
I think that's a guy in many group of friends. There's like that guy. He's going home. Like everyone's got certain priorities going home from the bar. There is a craft dinner guy that exists in many groups of friends.
Yeah, if it's around and it's the only option, believe me, it would go down. There's no question about that. But yeah, I had not seen that. My dad actually sent me a text today. Like he was in awe of the past of Noodles. And Noodles was, I guess, on a craft dinner box in 1995 as a member of the New York Islanders. I don't know why Gord Miller decided that today was the day Gord was going to make sure that got sent out, or was that because of Craft Hockeyville?
Craft Hockeyville.
Okay, so it was all linking it together and then being back out in Halifax.
Yeah.
But anyway, Noodles off today. O's off. I don't know what O's doing, but he'll be back tomorrow. And he'll be back in time for the Jays in the playoffs. It was all so easy. The ultimate backdoor into the playoffs, right? You finish with 89 wins. You blow a game on Saturday. You kind of get stomped on Sunday. You get booed off the field at points. Like they call up a pitcher that no one's heard of before. It's a packed house. They hit 3 million tickets sold this year, which is certainly an accomplishment internally. They're pretty ecstatic about that, as they should be. They pumped a lot of money into the new stadium or the old stadium with upgrades.
Yeah.
But I know what people are saying today, and I've already had this conversation with a few people. Watch what you wish for, right? We just saw it with the Leafs and Panthers. We just saw it. Watch what you wish for. Yes, but that's if your own team chokes away a great opportunity, right? It's always watch what you wish for in retrospect. The Leafs should have beaten Florida. And 10 days out of 10, you pick the Florida Panthers over the Boston Bruins. 10 days out of 10, especially with home field or home ice available to you, which it was. They choked it away. Good for Florida. They went all the way to a Cup final. It doesn't change the fact that it was the better opportunity for success for the Leafs. The Leafs just did not take advantage of that. I think the same thing applies here. Minnesota can hit for power. They got a couple of stud arms at the top of the rotation, like every team is going to for the most part in the playoffs. But the Jays are healthy. The rotation lines up well. They took 2 of 3 in Minnesota early this season, and Minnesota is a worse team than Tampa. So, sure, by Thursday night or by Friday afternoon, maybe by Wednesday night, we are looking back saying, watch what you wish for, but that's because the Blue Jays will not take advantage of a situation that is better than the opposite one.
It's up to them.
It's still a better option than Tampa. You just have to take advantage of it.
Yes, you still need to perform. And when you look back at the whole season in the context of it, it wasn't that long ago that, you look at certain analytics and there was a time the Jays are like 75% Fangraphs. They're going to make the playoffs. Then 2 weeks later, they drop down to 37%. And people are freaking out, probably ourselves included, saying these guys are going to choke this away. They were in the playoffs, a golden opportunity where they're going to go play against Minnesota in the Central. It's not as strong of a division. And then they find a way to get in. And I would say they're exactly where they should be. And now the opportunity is there for them. And, like Steve Phillips likes to say it, like it's like the sleeping giant, right? Like at some point they're going to wake up. Now would be a very appropriate time for that to happen, considering you've been given this second life here in the playoffs in a very favorable situation.
Right, exactly. And they're playing a team that has history going against them. Minnesota has lost 18 playoff games in a row, which is a longer streak than any other team in North American sports history. So you can spin that a couple of different ways, right? These guys find a way to lose, or they are ripe to break that streak.
Yeah.
Right? And do I think the Jays are going to walk in there and sweep? No, I don't, because that would go against everything we've seen out of this team all year, including the final week of the season.
Yes.
Right? Where the Jays, with the ultimate backdoor to get in, but they still got in. I would think this is a 3-game series. I think both teams are going to win. I think the Jays will win this series. I'm not overly bullish about that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying what Minnesota has got. Carlos Correa, we believe, is back, but he's banged up. I don't know if he's at 100%. They don't have like an individual player that hits for a lot of power, but they spread it throughout the lineup.
And their lefty bats seem to hit well off the two guys that the Jays could potentially have pitching in Bassett and Barrios. Right, like those
and
guys,
Gausman, for that matter. Gausman doesn't have a great history against them.
And I think those two guys combined this year have given up 37 home runs to lefties, and they're like a lefty-heavy lineup that can hit for some power.
Right, and you got Lopez on the mound tomorrow night. You're going to get Sonny Gray in game 2. Like it's not going to be easy. It will not be easy. And the Blue Jays I can't say they're going in red hot. They're not. This is not red hot.
No.
But Minnesota's not going in red hot.
Yeah.
Minnesota had the weakest division in baseball. They did their job. They got in. They've known they've been in for weeks now, and they've been setting up here. But I think it sets up well for the Blue Jays, again, because they found a way to sneak in Saturday night. They didn't have to waste Gausman yesterday. They have the rotation set up, and they are healthy. Rotation is ready, and they're healthy.
Yep.
And pitching and defense, that's what we've been talking about for years. That's what wins in the playoffs. That defines who this team is. We talked to Chris Bassett about it on Friday.
That's their MO.
That is their MO.
What do you think OverDrive Minnesota would be saying right now with the Twins drawing the Blue Jays? Would they be saying something like, that's just that team I didn't want to play because of what they could be? Or do they look at it and say, this is exactly who we want to play? They've been inconsistent all year. The pitching's there, but the bats don't really scare us anymore.
I think they're saying the exact same thing we're saying here, just like I think that's what Seattle was saying a year ago, and we were saying in Toronto. That's generally what you're going to get in a wild card. You're not talking powerhouses. You're talking teams that are flawed, teams that have had bad runs, teams that have black holes within their lineup. That's what the Blue Jays have. That's what Minnesota has. Let's face it, this core in Toronto does not have playoff success. They got swept last year. They blew an 8-1 lead. They had that game. The year before that, I guess the COVID year, or 2 years before that, they were 30-30, got in, went down on the Trop, got smoked. So it's not as if Bo Bichette and Vladdy and Kevin Biggio, et cetera, can sit there and say, we have history where we know what we're going to bring to the table, but neither does Minnesota.
Right.
So I would assume the same show that's happening in Minnie is saying, we're cool with this.
Yeah.
We're fine with the Blue Jays. And if you don't take advantage of it, it's your fault. And that's the reality here. Whoever's winning is going to walk away saying, of course we did. That's what's set up. It's set up to be that way all year. We felt good about our chances. And whoever loses, I think, will feel like they choked it away. Great opportunity.
Yeah. That little nucleus of like Bichette, Vladdy, Kevin Biggio, that's separate to the fact that Springer's on this team and he's had playoff success. And Kiermaier, like now this kind of, this new identity of the team that we saw where it was going to be a little more mature, a little more adult-like. I think now's the time you want to see that pay dividends for you. Like it was done with this in mind, having this this kind of small little window here to make something happen in a short series in the wild card.
Yep.
Now you need to see the dividends paid off.
Yep, veteran arms too, right? A veteran bullpen. Like, there's no reason to believe that the pitching will wilt under the pressure. No guarantees. We'll see what happens come game 1 tomorrow and beyond. But I think you feel pretty good about Gausman into, Bissett and, whatever else they're going to do moving forward here.
Yeah.
But I've seen the reactions, and it happens every single year, like the reaction to the partying when you clinch. You play 162 games, you party, man. Like, everybody parties. Whoever makes the playoffs, they shake it up. Yep. Why would the Blue Jays be any different? I understand it's 89 wins. It felt like an unfulfilling, frustrating season. Yes, they backdoored in because Seattle lost. Who cares?
That's baseball.
You get in, you party, have a good time, reset, go and see what you can do in the wild card.
Every team in the history of baseball has done this.
Yes.
This is the
it's
culture.
No different.
They're not going to start changing things because why? Because they had 89 wins. This is what you do. You enjoy the fact that you got into the playoffs. Every team does it, and away you go.
Right.
Like, there's no reason for them to go back to their clubhouse and be like, guys, actually, we're not going to have any fun tonight.
Right. We want to send a message that we're serious.
Yeah, we're not having any fun. We're not going to enjoy this long seat. Like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Enjoy yourself,
It's
man.
the way it happens.
Yeah.
It's a tough grind. Believe me, the Yankees would have loved to have been in that position. They're not. The Red Sox would have loved to be in that position. They're not. The Cubs, who choked it away. Seattle choked it away. The Padres choked it away. There's a lot of teams with big expectations. The Reds choked it away. They were in the driver's seat for a lot of the season. So you get in, you punch your ticket, you have a blast, you reset, and then you see what happens game 1 tomorrow. Keegan Matheson, who is down in Minnesota, he'll join us in about 10 minutes. Steve Sands on the Ryder Cup later in the hour. We will get to that. But the Raptors arrived today, and it was one of the more unique media days I can recall in team history.
Wasn't it? Bizarre.
Bizarre is an understatement, and it was driven by Masai Ujiri because of what's hanging over this team and what's really happened over the last couple of years. And I think it began with Lowry leaving and then being down in Tampa and not flipping them at the deadline, and then the sign and trade, and then everything that happened beyond that. And you look at what just happened with Van Vliet, and Masai seemed to indicate he didn't trade him at the deadline to hook Fred up because he felt he owed Fred the opportunity to stay or not go somewhere where he would maybe be behind the 8 ball or something along those lines, which, again, that was my interpretation. He didn't say that on the record about why they didn't trade Fred when they could have traded Fred in retrospect. I think what it really – there's a couple things that said to me. One, he wanted to keep Van Vliet, and he didn't. And now he probably feels like he made a mistake, but he's not going to say that on the record.
No.
But secondly, I just don't buy into the idea that he wouldn't flip Fred because he felt he owed him something. If this is the ruthless Masai Ujiri that we all believe he is, that doesn't add up to me.
He didn't flip Fred because he didn't have an offer that he think was substantial enough to do it.
Which is still on him, though. Still on him in his interpretation of the value of Fred VanVleet.
Exactly. He thought he overvalued Fred VanVleet.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line on that.
I think you're probably right about that. And then he got burned because Fred left, and he got nothing for it. But you're going into a season with OG Anunoby needing a new contract by the end of the year, and Pascal Siakam. And there's a report out there, I think Mark Stein reporting, like OG plans on hitting free agency. Now, that game is going to go back and forth all year because he's not a max player. So you're talking just like Van Vliet. It's a negotiation. What I think is bothersome from Raptor fans hearing that, it's like if the reports are true, you wouldn't put him on the table for Damian Lillard, yet you're not sure you're going to be able to keep him. It's like we're doing this song and dance all over again.
He would have been part of the trade piece that would have brought back anything, whether it was last year if you were really trying to go for it or now in the summer. But
the comment of the day from Masai was when he was asked about the Siakam situation, where Pascal's going into a contract year. We don't know how much negotiation's been going on. There's been a million rumors in the NBA world about his availability. The belief that Siakam was on the table if you wanted him. You just had to pay the price. Here is what Masai had to say about Siakam's situation and about the selfish play that kind of permeated through the group a season ago.
We do believe that a lot of our players didn't play the right way.
Okay. I don't think the full clip, but we'll see if we can get more of it. But anyway, what he was saying was basically I'm not committing to anything until Siakam. The way I interpreted this was Siakam's the whipping boy for selfish play last year.
Yeah.
And I'm really confused as to what the motive is here for Masai to put the target on Siakam's back day one.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of what it felt like.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre that is this some kind of negotiating tactic? But why would the guy want to re-sign here if you're constantly talking about how he's the ringleader for being selfish on this team? I don't understand why you're attacking his character that way. I wouldn't want to re-sign with you if you're constantly kind of throwing innuendos out there that I'm the one that's, leading the charge for this team being selfish.
Right. And if, again, the issue with Siakam, then why didn't you trade Siakam? Like, if there's some problem here, and Masai went on to say, like, he believes in Siakam. They drafted him. They've developed him. He was a big part of a championship team. He's been an all-NBA type. Like, he's their best player. Until Barnes proves otherwise, this is Pascal Siakam's team. But there's a part of me that, again, appreciates Masai almost bucking the trend of the NBA, where this is a league that is run by the players. The players basically get everything. You never screw with the players. And Masai's like, I'm not giving you anything until you prove you're worthy of it. That's kind of the message he sent today. But I'm just not sure in 2023 players receive that message.
It's like
the
a
way
game
he
of,
wants it.
It's like he's playing a game of chicken, and if it doesn't work out, he's going to get burned.
Yeah.
And listen, you go back to the DeRozan trade for Kawhi. That's his golden moment, and it led to a championship. Since then, it's been very murky, the waters that Masai has kind of been floating around in. It hasn't exactly been a great track record since then.
No, and that's why comments like this are very confusing. Like, is he upset with Siakam that goes deeper than what we're really seeing when he speaks of, selfish play? Is that just on the court? Did he see stuff behind the scenes that we're not privy to? But if you did, and you've soiled on this guy, then get him out.
Right.
Like, why are you even going into a season with this hanging over the team? And I can't project where we're going to be a year from now. But if it leads to Siakam walking basically for nothing, Anunoby walking for nothing, Van Vliet walking for nothing, effectively Kyle walking for nothing. I know they got Precious, but I'm not sure what Achua is right now in the NBA. 2019 is a long time ago.
Dude, all his goodwill has run out.
That's just not a good look.
No,
if it gets to that point, I don't see how Masai could possibly explain that.
No, all his goodwill has run out at this point. It's a shame because, it's almost like there's this aura around him and everything he does, and the Knicks were pursuing him for the longest time, and now it's like, dude, you're behind, man. You got to get with it.
Yeah, and it's a weird day one, and even it puts the new head coach in a tough spot because it's like, hey, Darko, what's up with Siakam?
Yeah,
like, is he your project? Pascal Siakam's a veteran in the NBA. This is a rookie head coach. Is it his job to make sure that Siakam's learning things and is adjusting his approach? Just a really strange day one for the Raptors in what I think could be a really compelling roller coaster type season. Luke Wilson in studio in the 5 p.m. hour. Chris Johnston coming up later this afternoon. The Leafs are in action tonight at home against Montreal. The big boys are playing. It's basically an NHL lineup tonight. We'll get to that a little bit later on. Keegan Matheson on Jays Twins. Steve Sands on Europe laying a beating on the U.S. at the Ryder Cup later in the hour. Frankie Corrado's in here. I'm Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Luke Wilson will be in studio at 5 o'clock. Chris Johnston later this afternoon. Raptors Media Day. The Leafs are in action tonight. The Jays are off. They're in action tomorrow. Like, you see all that partying in the clubhouse. You can't, get so buckled that you're risking a massive hangover today.
The 48 hour
do
rule.
that.
You know that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's some older guys on that team. 2-day hangovers are absolutely within reason.
That's
within
worse.
That clubhouse.
Like if they were getting after it tonight and playing tomorrow, that would be better than getting after it last night and playing Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Like the 48 hours, that's what gets you. You can do it guilty the next day, but there's that extra day in between that'll jam you up.
Yeah, that's when it really kicks in. You add in some travel, time zone issues.
You need to
4 o'clock game.
You need to be fueled by guilt. Number one.
Yeah, but that's not what's coming, right? Because you didn't sneak in a party. The whole world knows what you were doing.
Yeah.
Here's Keegan Matheson of MLB.com. Like, how deep were they getting last night, Keegan?
You know what? I was most impressed when I saw a couple of the tequila bottles start to make the rounds there. I think beer and champagne you can handle, but there was certainly some action on the go. I was impressed. You know, I think 2 days is enough for that. I'm very much from Toronto, but my liver is very much from Nova Scotia, so I think that's enough to bounce back. But got after it, guys. They did.
Okay. Well, listen, I got no issue with that. You made your way in, right? It wasn't perfect. It wasn't scripted the way it was supposed to be. 89 wins and you backdoor your way in, but you're in. And I said earlier this hour, Keegan, you know, everyone's going to be saying, watch what you wish for, watch what you wish for. Fine. I'll admit publicly, watch what I wish for. I'd rather they're in Minnesota tomorrow than in Tampa. How do you feel about that?
I agree with that completely. And I think that when you look at starting the series right now, that's the thing that matters. You can live in hindsight, make anything look like a bad idea. It's hard. But in terms of how these teams match up, period, going into the series, I think this is a much better situation for the Blue Jays and gets them to a team that I haven't seen 100 times these last couple of weeks. We have seen a lot of Rays baseball at the end of the season, and the Blue Jays match up pretty evenly with this Twins team as well. They're here for a reason. They are very good. But if you had to pick, and if you were given a choice, I think I would point towards the Twins, and I think the Blue Jays were not exactly heartbroken it broke this way either.
Keegan, if you're a Jays fan and you haven't watched much Minnesota baseball this year, like, what do people need to know about this Twins team?
This team can pitch, too. They really can. You'll see a bit more power than the Blue Jays have in terms of home run totals. They're ahead of Toronto. But they can really pitch. You know, having Sonny Gray is an option there as well, along with Lopez. And I think the Twins are a good example of how we should evaluate bullpens in baseball. It might not be a great bullpen over the course of a full year, but lately they've been really good. They've kind of remodeled their bullpen towards the end of the season through August and September. It's a pretty good group right now. This is a fascinating matchup. I think these teams played each other 3-3 through the season, but a lot of good pitching on either side. And if you're the Blue Jays, you look at that and you say, hey, this team is built to win that 2-1 game. That's what they're supposed to do. So maybe that leans this in your favor.
So as of now, we know Gausman will start game 1 against Pablo Lopez for the Twins. Sonny Gray is going to be the game 2 starter. What is your understanding of John Schneider's plan for game 2 and possibly game 3 if it gets there?
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting, guys, and the Blue Jays have good options. And I will say that we have seen them make some interesting pitching decisions in the past in postseason scenarios, 2020 and 2022. Because you have Chris Bassett and Jose Berrios right there. Bassett has been pitching well. Berrios has been real consistent. His last outing, he got hit hard a bit there, but there were still 10 strikeouts. And at the same time, on top of all of that, where does Yusei Kikuchi fit? I don't know if I love the idea of him pitching some meaningful innings out of that bullpen, but if you prefer a lefty against this lineup to a righty, it's something you need to look at. I am very confident the Blue Jays will give us the answer that we'll wait and see. We will see tomorrow. But they've got options, which is a good thing. But it's not that simple going forward here, and this team has been creative and kind of zig when we've expected them to zag a bit in the past.
Keegan, Bryan was talking about a little earlier. One of the things the Jays really have going for them is that they are a healthy team. And, you know, going into this series against Minnesota, there's a few names like Carlos Correa, guys that are banged up that might play. How injured are the Minnesota Twins, and how much could that impact their performance in this series?
Yeah, they are beat up. And having Correa coming back is big for them. But how good will he be in the first 2 or 3 games? Are you immediately the best version of yourself? Pretty rarely, I find, with MLB players, even someone of his caliber. And beyond Correa, still a couple of question marks for the Twins. And frankly, the Blue Jays have been one of the luckiest teams in baseball when it comes to injuries this season, especially in terms of pitching. I shouldn't say all luck. There is some props due to the training staff and everything that goes into that, because you're not just keeping a rotation healthy, you're keeping a veteran rotation of guys 30-plus healthy, which doesn't happen all that often. The Blue Jays are about as healthy as you can be outside of Danny Jansen, which is a big loss, but relative to other teams, they are as good as it gets right now.
With Keegan Matheson, MLB.com. Jays Twins, game 1 tomorrow afternoon in Minnesota. When you consider the pressure that is on the offense, I think most people are going to look to Bichette. They're going to look to Guerrero. I think that's fair, but obviously Atkins and company have brought in veterans to try to supplement that over the years. Springer's been here for a few years. Belt and Kiermaier their first year. Merrifield acquired last year at the deadline. Like between Springer, Belt, Kiermaier, Merrifield, those are veterans that have played a lot of playoff baseball and a lot of high leverage baseball. How much do you think Schneider will rely on those 4 guys in particular, and how do you see them kind of scattered among the order?
You have to, and I think that top of George Springer followed by Brandon Belt, we saw that a couple times late in the season, guys. I think that makes a ton of sense. The thinking was to get more guys on base for Bo Bichette, going Springer, Belt, Vladdy, Bichette. I like it. It looked good at the time, and Springer and Belt are the 2 guys that know how these games work. Springer has been a hero in the postseason before. That's his whole reputation. That's why when you see a season from him like this, where the offensive numbers don't blow you away, I still look at that and say, hey, fine. He's here for the postseason. You know, he is here for these big moments. He's a guy with an 889 OPS in the postseason, 16 home runs, I believe, in 65 games. This guy, or 19, sorry, this guy shows up in these moments. It's not something we can put a metric or a measurement on, which can be frustrating at times. But when he keeps doing it, you have to trust it. And these are the exact games Springer is here for. Now, last year, guys, we remember how that all ended. He collided with Bo Bichette. He left on a medical cart. That's not what anyone had in mind. So it's time for him to really have his moment, because tomorrow, the next day, is exactly why they gave him 6 years, $150 million.
Is there any concern on your end that given the opportunity, a close game, 9th inning, Jordan Romano's out there and he's not able to close that game? Like, does that concern you at all with the somewhat shaky end of the season he had?
It has to be in your mind, especially with what we saw later at the end there with Jordan Hicks and Jordan Romano being used a little interchangeably. And we know how Romano has fared in tied games. Close games this year might not be safe situations. I think Jordan Romano is a fantastic closer and a guy that you have to trust fully. But being a closer, one of the crappy parts about it is that you are only good as your last few days. It doesn't matter if you saved 35 games and been a great Canadian closer for a team all year. If you stumble once or twice at the wrong time, that's how you get remembered for a season. So Romano is still a guy I would trust fully to bounce back from that. He has an ability to do that. Sometimes we even see it within and out. I feel like he allows a base runner or two just for dramatic effect sometimes, guys. It's amazing. But it's going to be a question. It's going to be on my mind when you see him run in. I know a lot of people watching will be on their minds, and that is understandable based on how we saw the season end.
So Minnesota has not won a playoff game in 18 straight, which I believe is a playoff record for North American pro sports. How much does that factor into the pregame tomorrow, Keegan? The Jays aren't going to speak on that publicly, but that, I think, would lean more into the fact that even though the Jays are on the road, and it's probably a pick-em for most books, the pressure probably still should be on the Jays to find a way to get this done.
It's kind of impressive, isn't it? And that's something that I didn't know myself until just yesterday. My head is so deep inside Blue Jays that I don't look around the league as much as I should. 18 in a row is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is beyond bad luck. That is absolutely wild. So that's going to be a factor. A lot of teams got on the Twins team. Maybe they've only lost a couple of those games, not all 18, but it's going to be, when you talk about coverage and talking to players, I am guaranteeing you every single story, radio show, TV show, preview of the Twins mentions that number and probably mentions it real high up. That is top of mind for people here. If you are a Twins fan, A, sorry, B, that's all you've been thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a torturous experience. It has to be on the mind a little bit.
Well, enjoy yourself down there, Keegan. It's going to be a fun few days, and I'm sure we'll do this again later in the week.
You got it, fellas. Anytime.
Keegan Matheson of MLB.com, live from beautiful Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Imagine
Great park, one of the great parks in baseball.
Yeah, beautiful. Remember that old one they used to have?
Gritty.
That was
Gritty.
gross.
Kirby Puckett just running amok down there.
With that AstroTurf, that
AstroTurf.
flat you're basically running on cement at that
That's
point.
right. Well, the Jays were there in '91 when the Twins went on to win the World Series. I think they lost in 5 games, I think.
Okay.
The last time these two teams played in the playoffs. And the last time the Twins won a playoff game was 2004. Johan Santana was on the mound for them.
Okay.
So you're talking a long streak. And again, it's not like the Jays have a ton of history either.
No.
Recently, the 15, 16 runs are pretty far in the past. But you look at this, I mean, tomorrow night, I think the Twins are favored. I'm trying to look this up. You can get, on FanDuel, the Jays to sweep the series pays plus 310. Jays to win in 3 games plus 290. And kind of similar odds for the Twins, both to win in 3 or to sweep.
Who's favored?
The way I'm trying to find this, I think game 1 odds, the Twins are, and I believe the series odds, the Twins are minus 124.
Okay.
Jays are paying plus money. So the Twins are favored at home.
Which is probably appropriate.
I guess it's reasonable to consider.
Home.
You're at home. You set up well.
Yeah.
You know, they got Lopez into Gray. You know, the Jays exactly are not, they're not a juggernaut. They have not been. They've been a very frustrating team all season. So it's reasonable.
Get that underdog energy, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it propels you. All you need is someone to get hot at the right time. Like if Vladdy can get hot, there's your X factor, right?
Well,
like that guy that can kind of stoke some fear into you at the plate and come through at a big time. Guys are going to be on base. Like, Springer's getting on base. Bichette's getting on base.
I keep hearing like Vladdy's got to get hot. That would be great, but I don't care who it is.
Right.
Dalton Varsho can get hot.
He is hot.
Talk to Pat Borders back in the day.
Dalton Varsho, every time I turn on TV, this guy's hitting a home
How
run
about
now.
Matt Chapman finally snaps out of it for the first time since April?
Perfect timing.
Ideally, Vladdy does too. Ideally, 1 through 9, you've got a juggernaut. It doesn't seem likely. The guy I circled is Vladdy because it's his team. He's been inconsistent all year. He and Bichette, Springer, like that's what you would expect. But if you're a Blue Jay fan, if you're John Schneider, who cares who it is? Brandon Belt, Kevin Kiermaier, Alejandro Kirk, I do not care.
Yeah.
Someone get hot, produce runs, and then continue to be consistent in terms of pitching and defense. If they pitch well, if they defend well, listen, you win 1-0, 1-0, you're moving on to the DS.
Man,
it doesn't matter how, it's how many.
One of the takeaways from this weekend watching the Jays play the Rays is that Rays team comes up clutch so often. Not every time, obviously, but more often than not, they're pretty clutch, man. They got a couple guys on, 1 out. They're cashing at least one of those runs.
It feels that way.
And they don't have to play that. They're going to go to Minnesota, and it's a good opportunity for them.
Yeah. I mean, Tampa hit 99 wins on the season. And that's without McClanahan's been out for a long time. Franco's been out for a long time. They've had a number of injuries to the rotation. They do it every single year. They've got a payroll like $40. There's no one gets paid on that team.
Dude, you tipped the caddy at Scarborough more than the payroll.
I did. I tipped him more. I tipped the guy at the Nash more. I'm just tipping everybody more than the Rays. And the Rays are playing wild card games at the Trop.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Make it make sense because I can't figure it out.
Good scouting.
Yes. All right, Europe laid a beating on the Americans. We had Hatgate, Joe LaCava up against Rory McIlroy.
We got to get into that.
It was a pretty wild Ryder Cup, and really it was all about Europe, just dummying Zach Johnson. Jordan Spieth was terrible. Justin Thomas was awful. Captain's picks.
Pick your buddies.
Right? O's not here. O's not here, but he was like, you got to have Justin Thomas. He was terrible.
Yeah.
He was terrible. So Steve Sands will join us, our buddy from the Golf Channel. He was on scene in Italy all week. He was there all weekend. Full recap. We'll catch up with Sandsy. We'll do that next. All right, Luke Wilson will be in studio at 5 o'clock Monday night or tonight. Seattle at the Giants. Taylor Swift, 17 times she was shown on NBC last night, which I actually thought was light because the game became compelling. If that was a blowout, if Kansas City won 41-0, she'd be on 50 times in the second half alone.
Are you in the camp of people that don't want to see her on a lot?
I don't have a problem at all that she's on. I really don't care. I mean, she's the biggest superstar in the world right now.
I personally think they should have a separate feed on like TSN Plus or whoever's doing the game of what's going on in the Taylor Swift suite.
Well, I would agree with that if you're going to bring Blake Lively out, Ryan Reynolds, Wolverine was there. Like, you got a lot of action.
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. It should
there's
just
a lot going on.
There should be an ISO cam, and you do some close-ups, you zoom out a bit. Like, just, we need the alternate feed, and if you could go picture in picture, like the old days, that would be perfect.
Listen, they are going to milk this. I have a theory, like a tinfoil hat crazy theory of what I think is coming.
I need to.
I'll tell you about it when Luke gets in here.
I got a couple too.
Okay, so the Ryder Cup, like, the Americans go to Europe and they just get spanked. 30 years of getting crushed.
Dummied.
And that's effectively what happened. It got a little bit dicey in the singles, right? The back end of the singles. Credit to the U.S. They battled. They didn't quit. But it was basically over day one. Let's head there now and catch up with our main man, Steve Sands of NBC and the Golf Channel. Sandsy, really nice of you to join us, pal. I know it's been a crazy week. How do you recap? We look back on it now. Europe obviously ends up winning big. I guess not overly surprising considering the history. But what do you think you'll remember most of the Ryder Cup?
Let me make something perfectly clear. If Blake Lively is involved, I'm in.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
That's it.
Agreed.
That's it. End of story.
Yeah.
Blake Lively shows up. Count me in. You know, it's a strange deal, man. I can't wait to get to the President's Cup in Montreal next year. I know it's not down by you guys are in Toronto, but it's going to be fun in Canada. The Ryder Cup, man, the Americans cannot get it together on European soil. 30 years, 1930. They get off to a terrible start on Friday morning, down 4-0. And I don't know about you guys, but literally we were all like, wow, this thing's like over on Friday. Like Rome was lost in a day is what we were thinking. And it's a bizarre deal. There's a lot of things that they could talk about and look at and look into. But the bottom line is they need to get better on the road. They need to get better being heckled and being booed and being jeered and not being on home soil and having different time zones. They need to get their act together on the road. It's ridiculous that you haven't won over here in 30 years if you're that good of a team.
Yeah, and everyone tries to come up with a reason for it. And I find, and this may be unfair, it might be a bit of a cop-out or a cliche, there's this belief, and you're there, you're on the scene, Stanzi, that Europe, they play for free, they'd pay to play, but the Americans, you know, they need to be paid to play. If you understand what I'm saying. It's like Europe has pride, and they'll do it for anything, but the Americans are like all greedy and they don't really want to be there. That is always the takeaway. I'm not sure I'm buying that. Where do you stand on that theory from people from afar?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, there's a little bit of truth to that. There's a little bit of exaggeration of that as well. Mm-hmm. I don't think money is the reason that the guys don't play well in Europe from the United States. I think there's a lot of factors there. I think that they're professional golfers. Should they get paid to perform when there are tens of millions of dollars being generated based upon their work? I do think that. Now, that is more of an American way of thinking than perhaps either Canadian or European or whatever it is. But that aside, that's not why they're losing. They're not losing because they're just not prepared enough and they're not playing well enough. And the preparation thing's a big deal. You know how guys are. It doesn't matter what sport it is. It doesn't matter whether it's the Leafs or the Raptors, the Argonauts. It doesn't matter what the sport is. You got to be prepared when you step up in class and step up in a level. And let's put it this way. There has never in my 24 years of doing golf, 33 years of doing sports, but 24 years of doing golf, I've never heard a player say, I'm going to take 5 weeks off and then go to the Masters, the PGA, the U.S. Open, or the Open Championship. 10 of the 12 Americans, 9 of the 12, if you include one live event for Brooks Koepka. So basically 10 of the 12 Americans didn't compete for 5 weeks before the Ryder Cup because they ended the FedEx Cup season, a long season on the PGA Tour, and they came here rusty. They didn't come here to practice. They didn't come here to play in the BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth in England or the Irish Open the last couple of weeks like the guys on the European side did. They kept themselves sharp. Again, none of these guys would ever go to the Masters and be at the Honda Classic on Sunday and say, hey, see you guys in 5 weeks at Augusta. That's not going to happen. And I don't know why they do that at the Ryder Cup, especially when it's over here in Europe. And they got their butts kicked. They got it handed to them. And that happens in sports. You guys know that. But I just think it's a preparation issue more than it is anything else.
Sanzi, it was well documented everything that happened on the course as far as the golf goes. But one of the biggest, sideshows, if you want to call it that, was the incident on the 18th green with Rory and the caddy, Joe LaCava. I mean, we saw the different angles about how it played out. How did you read that situation? Who was at fault? Who owes who an apology? Just give us the whole breakdown on it.
Man, I was standing there on the 18th green waiting to chat with whoever was going to be finishing. Ahead of each other, talk to the captains, whatever. Anyway, I love Joe LaCava. He's a dear friend, and he's a great caddy, and everybody in the sport, respects him. He made a mistake. You can't do that. You can't cross that line. You cannot insert yourself into a situation like that when you're a caddy. You can't do it when you're a player. When you're a caddy, you certainly can't do it. And McIlroy, did he overreact? I'm not one to tell someone how to react when he or she is offended by something or bothered by something. It got heated, it got elevated, and it was pretty wild. For golf, I mean, look, this happens every shift in hockey.
Right, exactly.
This happens every play in the NFL. This happens at every possession in the NBA. In golf, you just don't see that kind of stuff very often. So it was actually pretty cool to be there. But Joe was wrong. I think he knows he's wrong. Rory knows he's wrong. I think everybody knows who was right, who was wrong there. But it'll simmer down. It's fine. There's a lot of mutual respect. Again, Joe's a very well-respected caddy and person in the game. Everybody knows him. Everybody loves him. Rory and he have known each other for years. They get along very well. It'll simmer down. It'll be fine. But in the heat of the moment, Joe was wrong and Rory reacted pretty. His reaction was escalated. Let's put it that way. It was pretty wild to be there. And then Shane Lowry jumped in and they're cursing at each other, and I was like, wow. We're gonna get somebody's gonna drop the gloves.
Yeah, I know. It felt like it, man. It was a wild scene, and I'm not sure it gets to that level if that's still Joe LaCava, Tiger Woods caddy. Like if that's Tiger instead of Cantlay, I'm not convinced. In fact, I know it. Rory would not react the same way, but it's not anymore. Tiger's not there. It was Cantlay. Rory obviously was triggered and wasn't happy, but we want to ask you quickly before we get you out of here, Sansi, about the reaction to Zach Johnson. He's been absolutely getting roasted. For a couple of, he's got a rude awakening when he flies home because, the Spieth on 16, driver to 3-wood. Spieth was awful. Thomas was awful. His captain's picks really did not work out well. What do you make of the way he handled the whole situation and the likelihood that he's included in anything moving forward?
Oh man, it's tough. I don't know how you guys feel. But in my opinion, the captaincy in Ryder Cups and President's Cups is just overrated to me. I just, if his guys play well, okay, then the U.S. is going to win. But they didn't play well. And they didn't play well for a lot of reasons. And one of them is listen, he's the guy in charge, and there's no debate on that. And Zach is a great guy. A stand-up guy. He's not going to run away and hide from the criticism. Some of it is a touch unfair. Most of it is fair, and he understands that. When you're going to enter the kitchen, you got to be able to take the heat. So he gets that. I think that the Justin Thomas pick was fine. I would have taken Justin Thomas as well. If he never hits another golf ball, he's going to moonwalk into the Hall of Fame. I think that the Sam Burns choice was a tough one. But Scotty Scheffler and he are best friends. Scotty's number one player in the world. You wanted to play with him, put him out there Friday morning, and they got their butts kicked. And that happens. Again, that's sports. But Lucas Glover had won twice just before the Ryder Cup picks. Keegan Bradley had won once. He'd won once earlier in the year as well. So he's a two-time winner. He was passed up for it. Jordan Spieth on 16T was probably an overreaction by Zach. But again, in the moment, who are the three of us or anybody in the audience to decide, what a guy should and should not do? I never won a Masters or an Open at St. Andrews like Zach Johnson. You know what I mean? It's tough to do that. But I will say, I think the pairings were very questionable. And I think maybe at least one of the captain's picks was questionable. And this isn't just hindsight, this was at the time. So, again, if the guys played well, America would have won.
Mm-hmm.
And Europe played better, all credit to them. And they were a more cohesive unit, and they played better golf. You can't help that. But Zach understands the criticism he's going to receive, and he's been receiving already. And, he can take it. He's a stand-up guy. You guys would love Zach. He's a really great dude. And the guys didn't perform for him. They didn't play well, and he probably made a couple of mistakes and a couple of decisions that he would like to have back as well. But that's sports. That's live in the moment, man. That's why this is the greatest reality show in the world. There's nothing better than sports. It's the best.
It's the best. Really appreciate it. As always, Sansi, great job over there, buddy. Safe travels home. We'll do it again soon.
I'm going to go eat and drink some more here in Rome. I'm going to be about 900 pounds by the time I get back.
Attaboy. I love it. Get after it. Have some for us, too. Thank you, buddy. There's our main man, Steve Sands of NBC and the Golf Channel. Hour 2 coming up. Luke Wilson in studio Monday night or tonight. Owen Wilson with the pick. We'll get to that next.